the author and I have like the exact same type in men, I'd assume, because Justin was like exactly what I like, and he was so funny, and I really loved the humor in it. It was like set in this beautiful location, and I thought the romance was kind of developed really nicely, and I absolutely love this book. It was like such a perfect romance book in my opinion. When I think of a romance book, this is like exactly what I want. And I discovered that this is like, it's not like a series, but this is book number 3 of like some book, like, I don't know what to call it. It's not like books that lead into the next one. It's kind of like standalone novels, but I don't know what to call it because it's not a series. But they're kind of just like in the same universe, I guess. What was that? I don't know if the mic picked that up, but something just fell. I think it was my cat knocking a gate down. But yeah, so there are 2 other books like set in this universe or something. So I'm excited to read those. I think one of them is yours truly and one of them is part of your world, but I could be mistaken. So those are probably the next books that I'll read for like romance. So we will see. But yeah, this one was absolutely incredible. Like basically a perfect book in my opinion, and I loved the ending and I loved how everything played out. So yeah, I loved that. Okay. And then the next book that I read after that was Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli. This book is like a forbidden romance between a hunter and the hunted. It's set in a world where witches used to rule over everyone and they got overthrown. And they started to be hunted. And the main character, Rune, is a witch who is freeing captured witches, or like witches that are in like threat of being captured and killed. She's freeing them and like bringing them to a safe location. But there's this witch hunter, Gideon, who is like ruthless and tracks these witches down and like brings them to a brutal death. So Gideon is actually the brother of Rune's best friend. So Gideon and Rune start dating, and Rune's dating him to try to get insight on where he's keeping this witch that she's trying to save. And he's dating Rune because one of his like witch hunting partners suspects that Rune is the Crimson Moth, which is like this vigilante witch that's saving the other witches. So they're both trying to like get information out of each other, but a love story develops. I really liked this book a lot. It's a fantasy book, obviously, and I like anything fantasy. I just love. It could be horrible and I would still love it so much. Like, it does not matter to me. next book that I read after Heartless Hunter was another romance book, which is Wild Love by Elsie Silver. And before I even get into the plot of this one and like what it's about, this is the only book I read this month that I really didn't like, which is maybe possibly a hot take because Elsie Silver is pretty widely loved, but I just didn't really like this book. Basically it's about this girl Rosie, this woman Rosie, and this man, what's his name? Ford. So Ford is like this billionaire. He came from money, but he like made his own fortune, and he is like best friends with Rosie's brother. So they kind of like grew up together in this like small town during the summer. They would all spend the summer together. And Rosie and Ford always had a crush on her, but she didn't really know, she didn't really see him for who he was, and like didn't understand her feelings for him, but they had this really like, I don't know, foundational childhood together. And Rosie has some troubles with her relationship and some struggle with her job, and she ends up getting fired. She comes back and asks Ford for a job, and he also like ends up, he donated his sperm to a sperm bank to get money when he was younger, and he actually had some child from that. And that happens at the very beginning of the book, so don't worry about like being a spoiler. But then he has to navigate raising this child that showed up at his doorstep and kind of try and understand his relationship with Rosie. And it's just a very interesting dynamic, but I thought Ford was very, like, he was too obsessed with Rosie, and it was kind of weird and like creepy. And Rosie was such an annoying, insufferable character. Like, something about her was so unlikable and so irritating, and she was so like, it's just like, stop. She was annoying me so much. I hated her character. And their love story was so weird because they had this whole history, but like I didn't really feel the chemistry until it was like forced into the plot, if that makes sense. And there were like spice scenes, but they were the type of spice scenes that don't contribute anything to the plot. It's just randomly throwing in spice scenes into your book for no reason other than making the characters have a little moment together. And it was just, I didn't like it. Abby Jimenez is like my perfect example of a like love romance author. This book, I just really didn't like the plot. It was okay. I can see why she's popular. I see why people like her, but this style of romance is just not my thing, so I was a little bit, like, kind of boring. Like, the concept of the plot was a little bit boring. I still really enjoyed it, but instead of having a dynamic plot, it was kind of like the same back and forth, if that makes sense. If you read the first one, and you might know where, like, I'm going with that, but I don't want to spoil anything for anyone that hasn't read it if you wanted to. But I think you have to be really invested in the story to really like this, because the plot was not super exciting, if that makes sense. In my opinion. I mean, some people probably disagree with me, but in my opinion. So, yeah. Okay. The next book that I read was The Ashes in the Starst King. There's a sticker on this that still has residue. This is by Carissa Broadbent. This is another fantasy, it's so sticky, fantasy sequel book. So this is the sequel to The Serpent and the Wings of Night, which was probably one of the best books that I've read in so long, maybe my whole life. This fantasy book is in a world of vampires, and the first book was about this human girl being raised by a vampire king. She enters this trial called the Kachari, trying to get a bond with her father to gain his powers, since she is not a vampire and she has to kind of like fend for herself in a world of vampires trying to kill her. So she enters the Kachari, and if she wins, she can be granted this bond with her father by the goddess of death. So that's what the first book is about, and through the course of that, she meets this character named Rain, and a love story ends up developing between them. And then something crazy happens at the end of the first book that is like so unexpected, but so like amazing, like it's so exciting. And then this book picks up from there, and it follows Araya and Rain's. Araya is the human girl. Araya and Rain's kind of like relationship and how it progresses and develops after this crazy thing happens at the end of the first book. So this book was really good. I loved it. It was basically almost as good as the first one. It was incredible. This book is only like a duet, so there's only 2 books, so that's it for this series. But I believe that Carissa Broadbent is coming out with 2 more duets for the different like houses in this book. So there's the House of Night, which is this one, the House of Blood, and the House of Shadow. So I think she's making 2 more duets in this universe. So I'm so excited to read those when they come out. I would say the upcoming like new release book I'm most excited for is the next book in the Fourth Wing series. That one I'm really looking forward to, but after that, probably the next book in this series. I'm wondering like if it's gonna be completely new characters. I assume there will be a little bit of overlap with characters that were introduced in here, but I don't know. We'll find out. She's just such a good writer, so anything she writes, I'll read it. Like, sign me up. Okay. And then the last book that I read this month was Normal People by Sally Rooney. This book was absolutely nothing of what I expected it to be. Not even close. Because this book was so popular, I was imagining something so different, but this book, I absolutely loved it, but something about it was so unsettling, if that makes sense. It's about these 2 people that meet when they're young, and me know what you think about it, and if you had the same, like, feelings. Because I was so unsettled by this. I don't know why. Okay, and then that was the last book that I read, but I'm gonna show you this one because if I wasn't so busy, I would have finished this one this month too. This is Caraval by Stephanie